in Bhagavatam? I mean, first Prabhupada Lilamrita? Is it okay? I don't know. Whatever you're doing, you tell me. You want Kirtan first? I'll do Kirtan. Huh? Okay, I'll do Jaya Radha Madhava. In order not to disturb anyone's mind. Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava, Radha Madhava, Radha Madhava, Shri Radhe. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe. Jaya Gaura Nitai, Gaura Nitai, Gaura Nitai, Jaya Gaura Nitai. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Balada, Jaya Subhadra. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Hariva, 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 Nitai Gaura Hariva. Jai Om Shnipad Brahman Saparivraja Acharya Satrasada Zvanga Sabhajan Narvind Bhaktidan Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Purushottam Kshetra Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Golakher Premadana Harinam Sankirtana Yagya Ki Jai Janitai Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhaktaresh, Madhi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitinamane, Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pracharya Nirvisha Shunyavadi Pashtatya. So we're reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, The War. Although few scholars taught the way of surrender to Lord Krishna as espoused in Bhagavad Gita, almost all respected Bhagavad Gita as presenting the essence of all knowledge. The Gita, therefore, was the perfect vehicle for confronting those who misrepresented God and religion. The Gita was a challenge to the agnostics, apatheosists, anthropomorphists, impersonalists, henotheists, pantheists, and absolute monists. Although there were already more than 600 commentaries on Bhagavad Gita, they had been written by persons with an inner hatred for the personality of Godhead, and therefore they were imperfect. Such envious persons, Abai wrote, have no entrance into the real meaning of Bhagavad Gita, inasmuch as a fly cannot enter into the covered jar of honey. Abai described Indian culture as an almost impassable ocean due to its depth of thought and apparent mixtures of conclusion. But in this book, Abai declared, I will establish that Krishna is the absolute personality of Godhead by referring to the available records of scriptures, which are the recorded history of Indian culture and thought. The sannyasis at 7 Banerjee Lane were impressed by the scope of Abai's thought and intentions, as it was customary to award the title to an especially worthy Vaishnava according to his qualities. Bhakti Saranga Goswami wanted to confer upon Abhay the title Bhakti Siddhanta. Sridhar Maharaj, however, thought it inappropriate to give Abhay the same title as their spiritual master, and he asked that Abhay's title be changed to Bhakti Vedanta. Bhakti meaning devotion, and Vedanta meaning the end of knowledge. Abhay was grateful. The title combined the devotion of religion with the scholarship of the most rigorous philosophy as passed down by the scholarly followers of Lord Chaitanya. He appreciated the sincere gesture of his godbrothers and accepted the title as a further commitment to his spiritual path of preaching Krishna consciousness. Abai continued regularly associating with Sridhar Maharaj and discussing with him Srimad Bhagavatam. Abai encouraged him to preach widely, although Sridhar Maharaj was admittedly more the scholar and rather shy about going out and preaching. On several occasions, Abai tried to convince Sridhar Maharaj to go with him and charged Gandhi and Nehru as to why they weren't following the principles of Bhagavad Gita. Another fruit of the spiritual association at 7 Banerjee Lane was a book called Prapan Jivanamrita, compiled by Sridhar Maharaj, a collection of verses from various Vaishnava scriptures, including excerpts from the works of Rupa Goswami. It was divided into 6 chapters according to the 6 divisions of surrender. Abai, along with the sannyasis of the Devananda Saraswati Mat, financed the publication. Thus, it was published as a joint effort by friends. Jai Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ho. Will continue from September 3, 1938, 39, sorry. Okay. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavatam Sevaya Bhagavati Rutamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Bhavati Naishtiki. Long time I haven't given class. Jai Hare Krishna, good morning. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 19, which is entitled King Prithu's 100 Horse Sacrifices. And we're reading text 38. Let's do words first. Sa Tvam Vimrishyasya Bhavam Prajapate Sankalpanam Vishwasrijam Piprihi Aindrim Cha Mayam Upadharma Mataram Prachanda Pakanda Patham Prabho Jahi Satvam Vimrishyasya Bhavam Prajapate Bhavam Prajapate Sankalpanam Vishwasrijam Pipiprihi Aindrim Chamayam Upadharma Mataram Prachanda Pakanda Patham Prabhojahi. Devotees can do it first. Satvam Shasya Bhava Prajapate Kalpanam Vishwasrijam Pipiprihi Indrim Chamayam Upadharma Mataram Prachanda Pakanda Patam Prabhojahi Satvam Vimrishyasya Bhavam Prajapate Sankalpanam Vishwasrijam Pipiprihi Aindrim Chamaya Mupadharma Mataram Prachanda Pakanda Patam Prabhojahi Satvam Vimrishyasya Bhavam Prajapate Sankalpanam Vishwasrijam Pipiprihi Aindrim Chamaya Mupadharma Mataram Prachanda Pakanda Patam Prabhojahi. Ready? Satvam Vimrishyasya Bhavam Prajapate Sankalpanam Vishwasrijam Pipiprihi Aindrim Chamaya Mupadharma Mataram Prajanda Pakanda Patam Prabhojahi Satvam Vimrishyasya Bhavam Prajapate Sankalpanam Vishwasrijam Pipiprihi Aindrim Chamaya Mupadharma Mataram Prachanda Pakanda Patam Prabhojahi. Word for word translation. Saha, they aforesaid, from you, Vimrishya, considering, Asya, of the world, Bhavam, existence, Prajapate, or protector of the people, Sankalpanam, the determination, Vishwasrijam, of the progenitors of the world, Pipi Prihi, just fulfill, Aindrim, created by the King of Heaven, Cha, also, Mayam, illusion, Upadharma, of the religious system of so-called sannyasa, Mataram, the mother, Prachanda, furious, dangerous, Pakanda Patham, the path of sinful activities, Prabho, O Lord, Jahi, please conquer. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. O protector of the people in general, please consider the purpose of your being incarnated by Lord Vishnu. The irreligious principles created by Indra are but mothers of so many unwanted religions. Please therefore stop these imitations immediately. Purport. Lord Brahma addresses King Prithu as Prajapate, just to remind him of his great responsibility in maintaining the peace and prosperity of the citizens. Maharaj Prithu was empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead for this purpose only. It is the duty of the ideal king to see that people are generally properly executing religious principles. Lord Brahma especially requested King Prithu to conquer the pseudo-religious principles produced by King Indra. In other words, it is the duty of the state or king to put a stop to pseudo-religious systems produced by unscrupulous persons. Originally, a religious principle is one given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and it comes through the channel of disciplic succession in two forms. Thank you. We will have a quiz later on. What two forms? Because there is no explanation now. What are those two forms? Lord Brahma requested Prithu Maharaj to desist from his unnecessary competition with Indra, who was determined to stop Prithu Maharaj from completing 100 yagyas. Instead of creating adverse reactions, it was better for Maharaj Prithu to stop the yagyas in the interest of his original purpose as an incarnation. This purpose was to establish good government and set things in the right order. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuronmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpa Tarupyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Tam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Longate Grim Yad Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinatarinam. Time is still 8:30. 8:30 is the end. So, just as a little introduction to set where we are in the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which corresponds to the thighs of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this section, the third and fourth canto, they're considered to be Sarga and Visarga, the continuation of the creation of the first and second orders. And we can hear now many dynasties being discussed or mentioned by Maitreya upon the request of Vidura. So Vidura is very curious to know about the various descendants of Dhruva Maharaj, and he's very enthusiastic about the hearing. And Srila Prabhupada mentions that this hearing is this eagerness of Viduras is this proof that when Krishna Katha is heard and chanted from a right source, then it gives more and more enthusiasm and ecstasy and etc. People do not stop. And he's saying, how is it that some people might ask, they say, how can people devote so much time simply to talks about God? How can they spend so much time? But devotees are never satisfied or satiated in hearing and speaking about Supreme Personality of God or about his devotees. The more they hear and talk, the more they become enthusiastic to hear. The chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra is simply the repetition of 3 words, Hare Krishna and Rama. But still devotees can go on chanting this Hare Krishna mantra 24 hours, 7 days a week. Of course, this is our goal. We are, at least I am, still in the process of being able to chant 24/7. After Dhruva Maharaj, Maitreya, he is really quickly naming different different descendants of Dhruva Maharaj until he comes to the 7th and 8th generation, which is King Vena, King Anga, and King Vena. And so Vidura, he's very curious to find out how is it that from such a pious lineage, and particularly from King Anga, comes such a atrocious personality as Vena. And there is a description, there is some curse on the mother's side. Anyway, why King Vena was who he was. And so eventually he also was curious to know how is it that Brahmanas killed the King Vena, because they're supposed to be very compassionate, etc. So they're not supposed to be engaged in killing themselves. And so, of course, this leads to the appearance of Pritamara, because King Vena was dethroned by some mantras. That was the mantra they were chanting. Mantra, who, whom, and the mantra was chanted at a very high pitch. And that's how, actually no, that's the mantra they were going to use on King Indra. Sorry, yeah, mantra. So anyway, so this fourth canto is showing us different personalities. I was also thinking how King Vena, even though such a horrible person, he still made it to the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the Amala Purana. Right, very interesting. But this is to contrast, also to learn, because we're learning. Shukadeva Goswami, he is taking us through different personalities, and he's teaching us, or all the sages in Naimisharanya and Parikshit Maharaj and ourselves. He's teaching us that through the negative example and positive example. And of course, King Vena represents someone who is opposing Bhakti Yoga, who is very self-centered, egoistic personality, who goes to such degree as to say that you should worship me as a supreme personality of God. After which the Brahmanas were very upset, and so they dethroned him. So, and then we can see the example of Prithu Maharaj, who was turned out of the arms of King Vena, the upper portion of his body, the arms particularly is described. And so King Prithu is an Shaktivesha avatar, who is particularly representing Palana Shakti, which is the protection potency of protection. And so he is the Shaktivesha avatar who was particularly incarnated or inspired. We can hear here in this Lord Brahma saying, please consider the purpose of your being incarnated by Lord Vishnu. So that means that Lord Vishnu, he sent Prithu Maharaj, he sent at least the Shakti, this Palana Shakti, to particularly protect the people. And then there is a great deal of explanation of what it means to protect the people. So here, the first line is, O protector of the people in general, please consider the purpose of your being incarnated by Lord Vishnu. So Lord Brahma, he addresses Prithu Maharaj as Prajapate, the protector of people in general, Praja. Prajapati. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that Vishwasrijam Pipi Prihi reminds Prithu that progenitors who created him, the ones that were concerned about the population in general, because when the Brahmanas were not really concerned for themselves, they were concerned for the welfare of the people, because they saw when King Vena was there. First of all, when Anga left his father, Vena's father, he left for the forest. There was no king left. So they were very concerned for the people, what's going to happen to them, because the rogues, they started, the thieves, they started doing their black market stuff. And then, and then they were with the permission of Anga's wife, Vena's mother, they installed Vena as the king. And then, of course, again, there was a problem because Vena began his atrocious activities of really disturbing the people. And so the Brahmanas were again very concerned for the people. So then they dethroned him. And again, there was a problem. There was no king again. And so then it was decided that, okay, let's churn his body and produce a good king. And then there were, of course, Bahuka was the first one who came out, who absorbed all the negative qualities of King Vena, and he left to some other area. And then Prithu Maharaj, together with Archie, they came. And so that was the reminder. So Lord Brahma here, he reminds Prithu Maharaj that, hey, you were actually called, basically. You were sent by Lord Vishnu, incarnated by Lord Vishnu. for actually that purpose, to protect the people. That was your main purpose. So and Prabhupada clarifies that this was his only purpose of appearance. This was his only goal. So then we can see that Prithu Maharaj was predicted by the Brahmanas when he appeared, and he actually said that, hey, wait a minute, I haven't done those things yet. Please do it a bit later when I'm already going to perform those activities, then you can glorify me. But they could not desist because they were so happy, and they also could see, because Lord Brahma, when he came, he saw all the lines on the palms of the hands of Prithu Maharaj, that he was an incarnation, Shaktavesha avatar. So they knew for sure this was going to be a wonderful personality. And so it was described that Prithu Maharaj was going to follow all the religious principles himself, and he was also going to make sure that others also follow. He was going to engage everyone in following the religious principles and give those principles all protection. So here again, we can see that the whole problem is that there are irreligious principles introduced by Indra. And so he was supposed to also chastise. He was going to be a great chastiser of the irreligious and atheistic. So he was doing that as well. He was trying to, Indra was creating problems. So he was trying to chastise him. Srila Prabhupada says that in one of the purports, he says the duty of the king or the head of the government is described very nicely. They should see that people strictly follow the religious life. The king should also be strict in chastising the atheists. In other words, an atheistic, godless government should never be supported by a king or government chief. That is the test of good government. So where in the world now is there a good government, that is making sure that everyone is following religious principle and they're chastising the atheistic? Instead, what they're doing is, in the name of a secular government, the king or governmental head remains neutral. That's what's happening now. They remain neutral. They say, okay, and allow people to engage in all sorts of irreligious activities. They basically allow it. They're licensed to some degree, and they make some of it a bit unlawful, but still people engage in it. And we can see also that's common knowledge. I have been speaking to some people, this what you call them, Jehovah's Witnesses, the ones that stand with the stand on the streets. Usually we see them quite often on the street. So I approached them and we spoke for some time. Very nice people, and we were talking about how there's a correlation between the removal of religious studies at schools and the crime rate increase of the crime rate. So because they have removed all the religious studies from the schools, it's not allowing people to actually develop a proper moral compass in life. They don't know what is good, what is bad. They're just taught that whatever you think is good, and whatever you think is bad. But that's very subjective, and there's no really it's not really a standard for everyone to follow. And so now, of course, in the world there are so many things that are happening, and the youth is very, very confused, and they're actually almost being confused on purpose, like a big experiment. But actually, it's work of the demon. The demons always want. They want to remove Supreme Personality of Godhead from the center of everyone's lives, and they want basically a chaos. Because when there is chaos, it's easy to control people also, and to get what they want. Demons themselves, they want to just enjoy unrestrictedly. And it's said that by committing sinful activities such as eating meat, gambling, intoxication, and illicit sex, population becomes implicated in the laws of karma. So that's another problem, of course, because the government should be thinking not just about this life that people are leading, but every other life they will be taking later on. But that common knowledge is also not there anymore. But it's a very sad situation, because there's a lot of bad karma accumulates, and when bad karma accumulates, obviously there is war, pestilence, etc. And so we can see that in the world there are so many conflicts that are going on, and people are wondering why is that. But Prabhupada was saying that if you have, if there is, if there are slaughterhouses every 10 or 20 years, he said there must be war because there are slaughterhouses. It's just because of that. Amazing. So, and of course, in this age of Kali, there is no pious king like that who could actually lead their people in a righteous, proper way. And but Srila Prabhupada says an interesting thing in that particular purport there. He says that in Kali Yuga, this democratic government can be captured by Krishna conscious people. And Srila Prabhupada was saying devotees were very afraid of the Third World War. They were all symptoms that the war was coming at the time of Prabhupada's presence on the planet. And Prabhupada said that only devotees can stop this war from actually happening. He was convinced that this war will happen. And so how will it be stopped? By Harinam Sankirtan, by chanting the holy names together, by propagating this movement, by spreading this movement far and wide to every town and village, so that people's consciousness elevated, so they're not, so they can escape the influence of Kali Yuga. Actually, that's what it does. So we can see that the problem here is that irreligious principles were created by Indra. And so why Indra was doing all this wonderful thing, wonderful, of course, in quotes. So he is a demigod. He is the king of demigods, and he has a very high position. And he enjoys that position, of course. He's a devotee, but he's a Sakama devotee. Sakama devotee means that he's enjoying the material life, and he's also worshiping Krishna when it suits him, more or less. So actually, the root cause of Indra's situation is fear caused by envy. It's actually envy. So Indra is really envious of Prithu Maharaj because Prithu Maharaj is becoming very successful and he is about to take his position. So he is very afraid. And it's natural for all of us, excuse me, in the hospital or in the hospital, that we become very afraid that someone can take our position, basically. So we begin acting in maybe even unnatural ways that we thought that we're not capable of. So that is actually this envious mentality is the opposite of spiritual world. You can see there's a description of this enviousness in the Bhagavatam, Canto 11, chapter 2, text 37. When the living entity is attracted by the material energy, which is separate from Krishna, he is overpowered by fear. Because he is separated from the Supreme Personality of Godhead by the material energy, his conception of life is reversed. In other words, instead of being the eternal servant of Krishna, he becomes Krishna's competitor. Yeah, so this is the original envy. And then it's described that to nullify this mistake, one who is actually learned and advanced worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his spiritual master, worshipful deity, and source of life. He thus worships the Lord by the process of unalloyed devotional service. So he actually comes back to his original consciousness, because envy is the original sin, we can say. Yeah, that we were there with Krishna and we said, "Hey Krishna, I want to be just like you." And Krishna says, "No, not a good idea." But then we somehow or other we convince him and we try and become like Krishna. And this is the original situation of envy. And that is the whole material world, the mentality of the material world, basically. And to reverse that mentality is Anyabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karmadanavitamanu Krishna Nishilanam Bhakti Rutama. Yeah, that we throw out all the ideas of me being in the center and we put Krishna in the center and we do what Krishna wants. And that is spiritual world. That is the mentality of the residents of the spiritual world. They only do what Krishna wants. And they don't care about their personal necessities. And of course, the most wonderful story that describes that is the story of Krishna's headache, when Krishna had a headache and Narada Muni was trying to find the cure, and he found out, Krishna told him that, hey, the dust of my devotees is the only cure, And then Narada Muni, he goes around to so many different devotees, and all the devotees, they're like, well, we want Krishna's headache to go away, but if we give him our dust, we will go to hell. So then, it's an aparad. But when he comes to the gopis say immediately, how much? They start scrubbing their feet. And then Narada Muni, he is shocked, and they give him all this dust and say, go, 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 quickly, put it on his head. Get rid of this headache. So that's the mentality of the spiritual world. We do whatever is pleasing to Krishna. This not considering um, our own position, our own situation, our own suffering or happiness. Hmm? So Indra is basically, he's very envious of Prithu Maharaj. He's afraid to lose his position. And so he's accepting disguises of various sannyasis. And in that way, he is introducing all sorts of unwanted religions, which are later followed, and Srila Prabhupada also comments. And he even comments, which was interesting because I was just in Nepal, and Prabhupada says that sometimes they drink with the excuse that without alcohol, fish, and meat, it is impossible to remain in the cold countries near the Arctic zone. And I was in Nepal, and Nepal is considered to be a quite cold country because it's in the mountains. It's not as cold as where I'm from, because I was in Nepal during winter and it wasn't even snowing. I'm sure in mountains it snows. But anyway, the whole idea was that we were going around on Harinams quite a lot and meeting people, distributing books, prasadam. And a lot of times most common question that I was getting from people was, are you vegetarian? And I was very surprised because in India, no one asked that question. Because in India, everyone knows we're vegetarian. And they're not really surprised so much because, especially in South India, most of the people are vegetarian. No. At least there are many devotees, and they're hopefully vegetarian. But in Nepal, what I found out later was that actually even the Brahmanas, because of so many of these unscrupulous religious systems, they get so confused that even the Brahmanas, they drink vodka, they eat meat, etc. And so this was exactly what they're saying. They're saying it's impossible otherwise to live here, like this. So for them, the most difficult, they take books. Somehow they're very pious people. They still have that culture because the culture makes them quite pious. They chant the holy name with you, they dance, they give you donation, they take a book, they take prasadam. But it's very difficult to make them devotees. And this is the number one cause, is that they somehow or other they cannot give up meat eating. So they're non-vegetarian. Anyway, so this is thanks to Indra and his pseudo-religious systems introduced. And so Srila Prabhupada, in that same purport, he's describing how Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he comes and kills this unscrupulous or this pseudo-religious mentality of people. And this happened to all of us also. We all were somewhere in this pseudo-religious situation until Srila Prabhupada, Sanapati Bhakta, who I was thinking, I don't know if I've ever heard it, but Srila Prabhupada is definitely a preaching incarnation of the Lord. We talk about how Prabhupada is a Shaktavesh avatar, but he's particularly, I'm pretty sure he's a preaching incarnation of the Lord, a preaching potency. Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he says that my Sanapati Bhakta will come. So this is someone who's a general, he's preacher of Sankirtan movement. So he came and he introduced all this knowledge as it was brought down in the disciplic succession. So he gives us the real religion. And for this age, of course, the main anga or main limb of devotional service is to chant the holy name. Actually, my spiritual master is His Holiness Bir Krishna Goswami Maharaj. He sent me a letter once, and he said that please remember that until Srila Prabhupada has actually sat down under the tree in the Tompkins Square Park and started chanting the holy names, the hearts of the people were not changing. So you can introduce so much philosophy, you can talk to people about so many things, but their hearts are not going to change. So actually, the cleansing potency is the chanting of the holy names. When we go out and we chant and people hear the holy name, it's cleansing the atmosphere. It's helping people to somehow or other. Basically, Prabhupada said, I created this good fortune for you. Now it's your turn to create it for others. You go out and create this good fortune for others. So even if people don't become full-on devotees, etc., but still the atmosphere in the place becomes very purified. You can go to a place like temple. People come to the temple. Why is it so? Why do they feel something different? Because there is, continuous worship going on. Particularly chanting the holy name, serving the deities, reciting the scriptures, etc. So people feel that atmosphere. Yeah. So this is the main duty of ours that we need to carry out for Srila Prabhupada. And of course, Prithu Maharaj, he's also going to do something. We will just in a second, I'll finish. I have much more, but anyway. So the solution for particular situation of Maharaj Prithu is basically introduced or suggested by Lord Brahma. He is saying that please stop these imitations and stop the sacrifice, so that Indra stops this introducing all this imitation, all this sannyasi guises, etc. And so Prithu Maharaj, he did not incarnate to perform 100, Ashwamedha yagas. This was just like a side thing. It's a religious activity that a king would engage in, and basically that engages all the population also, because everyone is participating in the yagya. And obviously, they chant the holy name there also, and they perform it for benefit of the Lord. And of course, it's described that the more he was performing those yagyas, the more land became opulent where he was. It was more fertile. There were more jewels produced. There was more of everything. So I was just describing how beneficial is the yagya. But that was not his main purpose. That was like you can say it's a secondary principle or something he was just taking as an activity. But the main purpose why Prithu Maharaj he came was to stop pseudo religion, basically, and establish pure devotional service amongst his followers. So that's the main thing. And we understand that once I have asked my spiritual master, what's the main lesson of Ramayana? And the main lesson of Ramayana, he said, was that a true leader can sacrifice his happiness for the happiness of others. And we can see that Prithu Maharaj, he is a king, he is supposedly in the mode of passion, and he's interested in all this fame and all these things. And so he's performing these sacrifices, and he may have been enjoying the sacrifices, the attention or whatever the fame is going to bring him later on, etc. But he is happy and willing to sacrifice it for the higher purpose, for the happiness of people. And Lord Brahma actually, I don't know if he already said it or if he's going to say, that he is going to be more famous than Lord Indra anyway, though he performed on the 99 sacrifice. But he said, okay, you make peace with Indra, you make friends with him. And that was also discussed in one of the classes, that actually King Prithu, he is just an earthly king. And Indra is the heavenly, the king of all the demigods. So technically Lord Brahma should have gone to Indra and asked him to please, because he is elderly, senior to Prithu Maharaj. But actually Brahma goes to King Prithu because Prithu is more senior than Indra, because Brahma looks at the quality of bhakti, how much bhakti someone has. So in Prithu Maharaj, he definitely has more bhakti than Indra in this particular situation, at least. So Lord Brahma is asking Prithu Maharaj to please make friends with Indra. So he does that. And so that's the main thing. So Prithu Maharaj, he establishes pure devotional service. That's why he was And that's what we need to do also. We need to be able to discriminate between some details and higher principle. Like Srila Prabhupada, he came and he crossed the ocean, for example. The sannyasi is not supposed to cross the ocean, but he crossed the ocean because order of a spiritual master and because the message of Lord Chaitanya needs to be heard. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself said that every town and village, so it needed to be, so that's a higher principle. Then Srila Prabhupada also introduced Mangalarti in a different way. Never before or anywhere else do they sing anything like Guru Vashtaka in the morning. Always something about Radha Krishna, like in Vrindavan they have Vibhavarisha Shah, for example. But the idea is that Srila Prabhupada has established that. So there's a principle, main principle is Mangalarati, but how you do it, Srila Prabhupada is an Acharya, he's able to establish things in such a way that people are attracted to spiritual practice. And same also he did with 64 rounds to 16 rounds, somehow or other. But the principle is there, still chanting the whole name is there. And of course, I can see how Yudhishthira Maharaj never spoke a lie in his life, but for Krishna's satisfaction, he should have lied at the time when this elephant was supposed to be killed, Ashwatthama, or he was killed. He should have said it, but he didn't because he was. So that's a lesson we learned from Yudhishthira Maharaj. And Yudhishthira Maharaj had to see hell for that purpose. he did not listen and didn't follow Krishna's Sarvadharma Pariteja Mamakam Sharanam Vraja, that you give up everything, whatever conceptions you have about yourself, and just do whatever I tell you to do. And Bhishma also learned that lesson at the bed of arrows, that he should have switched to Pandava's side and not be so attached to following his vows, etc., for the higher purpose. And then there's so many examples like that. So yeah, so also in our life we should also be. Sometimes we take some like I don't know, the dress we wear. Some people are really attached to the dress, the shika, maybe the different things. We can give it up because those are not eternal principles anymore. For the higher principle, of course, we should do it only on the order of superior. Okay, so in conclusion, we can see that in our situation, what we can do to establish this bhakti yoga is we should preach. We should basically share Krishna consciousness with others, and there are so many methods. The supreme of which is chanting the holy name, because that should be the center of all activities. Because even if we go out and we distribute so many thousands and millions of books, which has already been done to a large degree, and then people come to the temple, etc., and it's just quiet and peaceful and nothing is going on. Yeah, so we should be practicing what's there in the books. Yeah, all these books you can see, and like Prabhu is quoting, and I always also mention that the last verse of Srimad Bhagavatam begins with Nama Sankirtana Yasya Sarva Papa Pranasham. That Nama Sankirtana will destroy all sinful reactions and to basically establish the atmosphere in which the spiritual world can manifest. Otherwise, it's a material consciousness. So the quiz, as promised. So in the purport here, Srila Prabhupada says, originally, a religious principle is one, given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and it comes through the channel of the cyclic succession in two forms. There is no explanation. So you have any thoughts on what are those two forms that the religious principle that is one, it's given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and it comes through the channel of the cyclic succession in two forms. Any idea? I have some, so don't worry. But nice. Huh? Personalist and impersonalist. That's interesting. Yeah, but there are two. So oral reception and what? Scripture. But scriptures are oral reception. They're just written down for us because we don't have the memory. Yeah, so this is technically oral reception. It's just instead of our memory, we have books. So it's still oral. Yeah, anyone else?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
I have heard. I mean, first of all, what came to my mind originally was that it is the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavatam. So we have the book or the Shastra, and we have the personal example. So two forms. One form is Bhagavata scripture, and the other form is the actual living example. Then in one class, one person was mentioning that there is Dharma and there is Upadharma. And in this particular verse, we can see that Upadharma is translated as irreligious system, but it's also translated in other parts of Bhagavatam. Prabhupada also translates it as sub-religious principle. So those are like, don't be a pig, basically, be a nice person. So some sort of moral principle. And you can say actually that this is like Buddhism. And Buddhism is impersonal. So in a way, you can say it's personal. So real Dharma is personal, and you can say sub-religious principles, they represent this impersonal kind of aspect. Yeah, and so yeah, so those are just moral. Prabhupada is explaining in second canto, 7th chapter. He is explaining how in religious principles there must be God in center, otherwise simple moral instructions are merely sub-religious principles. So this is saying the same thing essentially. You were really spot on. But I also asked my spiritual master about it, and so his response was that there's bona fide and unbona fide. So it's basically what he said was, yeah, so disciplic succession, broken and unbroken in two forms. Okay, on this happy note, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari. Jai Krishna Chandra Prabhu ki jai.